Hi guys, I'm the Drink Pro. Today we're drinking Woodford Chocolate Malted Rye. Hey everybody, thanks for joining me, the Drink Pro, here with you again today. Thanks so much for subscribing, sharing these videos, and being a part of the drinking professional community. Today I've got a wonderful pour I want to sample. It is the Woodford Masters Collection Chocolate Malted Rye. Now Chris Morris, the master distiller at the Woodford Distillery, which is owned by Brown-Forman, has each year, twice a year, released different Masters Collection whiskeys. And they have this interesting little round bottle with a top to it, and they sell for a pretty penny compared to the standard Woodford Reserve pours. But they modify different parts of the process to give you really interesting presentations. The chocolate malted rye is a process where they malt the rye to a point where it has this rich chocolatey quality. Now this is a relatively expensive bottle. I've seen it, I think, around $100 to $130 MSRP. So that's a pretty penny for something when your standard Woodford Reserve is probably $35, maybe $40. So there's no age statement on the chocolate malted rye, but the mash bill is known. It's 70% corn and 30% rye. Now half of that rye is this chocolate malted rye, which goes through a special malting process to give it this chocolate flavor. I'm really excited to try this out because I've heard a lot about it, and it's actually a pretty divisive pour. Some people just absolutely hate it, and some people swear by it. So for that kind of price point and the divisiveness, it gets me excited. So let's give it a shot. Oh yeah. We're finishing this sample bottle. Let's give this a smell. It definitely smells like chocolate right off the bat. It's overwhelmingly chocolate on the nose to me. It's sort of like a semi-sweet chocolate. It's got that, it's almost got like a granular smell to it, which is an interesting note. It smells like these interesting grains and the sweetness. There's definitely a rich, sweet undertone. I would call it a molasses. It's that kind of broad, thick sweetness, but it's very subtle. So the molasses sweetness is generally an in-your-face sweetness, but imagine that same flavor profile turned down several notches. There's definitely vanilla on this. There's definitely caramel on this. It's got a lot of the classic sweet aromatics that you pick up from a bourbon. Or a rye, for that matter, but I usually get more of them with bourbons, the sweetness. Actually, I think it's worth noting here as well that although this is called the chocolate malted rye, it's a bourbon. Rye needs to have more than 50% rye grain, and this is 70% corn. Now this is a high rye bourbon, but it's actually a bourbon where half of the rye component has been gone through this chocolate malting process. So a lot of the notes on here are very classic bourbon. The sweetness of maybe a molasses or a vanilla, maybe even a toffee or a caramel note, but the chocolate is so prominent and that rye characteristic really shows up. It also has this granular chocolate smell. It's like fresh semi-sweet cocoa powder, and it's combined with this soft woodiness. It's somewhere between like a cedar and a walnut. I'm picking up some interesting other brown spice notes, maybe a hint of coffee, very subtle hint, maybe even a hint of tobacco. These are very classic notes. I even get maybe a hint of black pepper on the nose on this, just a hint. All right, let's go ahead and taste this. When you first taste it, you definitely recognize that chocolate, almost overly chocolatey. Oh, oh, oh. Your initial tasting and your mid-palate on this are pretty much what you'd expect, but the finish just blows up, gives you so much coffee and this weird semi-sweet chocolate aftertaste. It's kind of bitter, but kind of sweet and kind of woody, almost like a chalky wood. Very interesting pour. As soon as it hits your tongue, you get this interesting soft chocolate orange note with vanilla showing up. Mid-palate is kind of nutty. That walnut I was talking about on the nose picks up in the mid-palate. And you have this sort of soft chocolate start to show up, but then the finish is really long and really chocolatey. Like I said, you get the chocolate and this cocoa powder and this coffee. And it sticks with you. It's still there. This nutty chocolate undertone is still on the palate. It's really extraordinary. I'm not sure if I like it yet or not, to be honest with you. It's such a weird experience. It's so different than anything I've had. It's hard for me to pin down if I actually enjoy this pour. I will say, going back to the nose after tasting it, a lot of that chocolate dissipates. You get the nuttiness. A sweet cereal note from that malting process shows up. There's definitely some chocolate, but I'm also getting some underlying baking spices. There may even be a subtle berry note underneath all of this on the nose. But the predominant flavors and the predominant nose are woody, nutty, chocolatey. I don't think I would recommend this at $130. I think if you really enjoy chocolate notes, maybe it's worth picking up as sort of a novelty. This is not something I could pick up regularly and drink regularly. You know, I talk a lot about the different kinds of whiskey presentations, how you want something that's either like, can be background whiskey or something you focus on. This one draws attention because it's so different and so prominent, but it's not that interesting. I've given a lot of flavor notes, I know, but they keep happening in that exact same way. I haven't had any evolution as I keep drinking this and as I keep exploring this. You get the nose of straight chocolate, essentially, when you first smell it. When you taste it, you get that sweetness, the vanilla, maybe a hint of citrus, into the nuttiness, into the chocolatey note, and the woodiness, and the coffee notes. You go back to the nose after tasting it, and you get subtle hints of the sweetness from the cereal, from the malty, maybe even a hint of berry, but it doesn't change much from there. So if you really love that profile, this is a great pour for you, but if you're looking for something to explore, it's not really a good profile for you, and if you're looking for something to be a daily drinker, it's not a good profile for you. So it's a real niche market for this pour. I can tell you I won't be buying a bottle of it, even though I think it's good and interesting. It's not my favorite, and it's so predominant on the palate, you can't avoid the chocolate, you can't avoid the sweetness, and even though it's a good flavor, it's just not a versatile bourbon at all. It's not something I could drink in most applications. Maybe if you had a piece of chocolate cake, it would be good with that. Or maybe if you had, you know, something that was sort of nutty or where chocolate would fit in well, maybe with a cup of coffee, this would be good after coffee or before coffee, but it's a very niche whiskey. I'm glad that Brown-Forman's master distiller, Chris Morris, is exploring what can be done with his whiskeys, trying new and different things, but I think this is not exactly where I want my Woodford Reserve to be in the palate. This is a cool exploration of what Woodford Reserve can become, but it's not something I would go to on a regular basis. So thanks again for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, clicking the bell so you get notifications. Anything you can do to help support me, I appreciate it 1,000 times over. Thank you so much to my Society of Drinking Professionals on Patreon. You guys are helping to keep this show alive. Thanks to anyone who sent in samples. Keep doing what you guys are doing. I'm going to try to enjoy this in a little bit different way. I might mix it with some chocolate cake. But in the meantime, you all keep drinking like professionals. Cheers.